Right at 6:30 on this Friday, friends and neighbors gathered in Great Falls last night to remember a child who was murdered. Coming up, what police are saying about the child's parents, who are among those arrested for that crime.
A statue has been delivered to the Butte Fire Department as part of a memorial that will commemorate one of the worst disasters in firefighting history.
I watched part of that earlier this morning. It's super cool. You're going to love
Incredible,
that story.
huh?
It's really super cool.
Yeah.
6:30 on this final Missy Friday on Montana this morning. This morning's drive-in, I don't know if you saw it when you guys came in, but when I came in this morning, the crescent moon was sitting right on the road coming up off from Jackrabbit. It was sitting on the road. It was the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Beautiful.
I tried to take a picture of it, but I figured I better not crash into anything. So
I just want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to the two of you, our amazing cast and crew. Today is my last day, at least for some time. I'll probably be coming back to fill in here and there. But it really has been such a joy.
Well, bigger and better things.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're super happy for Missy, sad for us, but happy for you.
I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
No, well, I'm going to move on to weather.
Let's do that.
Temperatures holding into the teens this morning, 15 degrees in Bozeman. It looks like our afternoon back into the 40s. We're going to break down all these football game forecasts and much more, of course, coming up in a few minutes. And, of course, as we head into next week, Thanksgiving right around the corner, we've got some travel forecasts that you'll want to get a preview on as well. That's all coming up, of course, in just a few minutes.
Thank you for that, Matt. 6:31. As Chet just mentioned a moment ago, our top story for you, a sad one. A small candlelight vigil was held last night outside of an apartment building in Great Falls, where a 5-year-old boy was found dead on Wednesday.
About a dozen people at any given time gathered around the memorial, standing silently in the freezing cold. As some left, others arrived. Some brought candles and others stuffed animals.
Clustered around that group of candles was a teddy bear, a Scooby-Doo doll, a Spider-Man, some flowers and cards. One police car still remains parked in front of the entrance to that apartment building.
Now 3 people have been charged with deliberate homicide for Antonio's death. His parents, Emilio Renovo, Stephanie Byington, and Roscoe Birdtail, an acquaintance of the mom and dad.
Now, police say emergency dispatchers responded after 9 a.m. on Wednesday to the apartment complex on 9th Street Northwest in Great Falls. First responders performed CPR on the boy, but he died at the scene. Details are limited at this time, but we do know that 5-year-old boy's name was Antonio.
Now, Renovo and Byington are both charged with deliberate homicide, criminal child endangerment, and assault on a minor. Birdtail is charged with deliberate homicide and tampering with evidence. All 3 are currently being held in the Cascade County Detention Center on $500,000 bond each. Now, both Renova and Byington have felony convictions, by the way, out of Yellowstone County as well.
And following up on a story that we brought you earlier in the week, 2 suspects have now been identified in connection with a violent break-in at the National Fish Hatchery in Ennis.
Yeah, the hatchery was vandalized back in October. Around 30 fish were killed. Madison County Sheriff's Office says after MTN News spread the word, tips led them to 2 juvenile suspects. Both of them are non-Madison County residents. 2 suspects face the same charges out of Madison County, including felony aggravated cruelty to animals, and 2 misdemeanors, criminal mischief and youths in need of intervention. Officials say the investigation is still ongoing, pending restitution.
And a Spokane woman entered a not guilty plea yesterday in a Butte District Court in connection with stabbing a Butte woman back in September.
Shelley Kromm is charged with attempted deliberate homicide. She's accused of stabbing a 39-year-old Butte woman in the chest outside her Jackson Street home the evening of September 1st. Now, the victim survived that attack.
And after entering that plea, District Judge Kurt Kruger remanded Kromm a $75,000 bond for Kromm. Investigators say that she and the victim knew each other and the attack appeared to be completely unprovoked. The motive is not known at this time.
6:34 now. In other news, starting in October of next year of 2020, you could be denied permission to board your flight if you don't have an approved real ID when you get to the TSA check-in.
You'll need a real ID compliant driver's license or a passport card, a military ID, a tribal ID, or a government ID to be even allowed to enter the TSA check-in site.
Now, the real ID requirement was passed by Congress 14 years ago, but the compliance date has been pushed back again and again. TSA spokeswoman Lori Dankers says the Department of Homeland Security says October 1st of 2020 is the final date for real ID.
Rather than speculating on what may or may not happen first, we're asking people to instead spend that time and that energy determining what type of identification they're planning to use. At this point, all indications are that on October 1st, 2020, the officer at the travel document checking station will be asking for a Real ID compliant driver's license or identification card or another acceptable form of identification. And beyond that, I don't have any information.
Oh, I'm not here to sell either document to you today, but I am here to say that that's what we want people to do. We want them to make a decision for themselves whether they want to get a Montana driver's license that's Real ID compliant for domestic travel and access to federal facilities, or would they rather carry their passport in with them when they travel domestically on an airline.
Now, Dakers recommends against carrying a passport for domestic travel because of the danger of losing it and the difficulty of replacing it. Instead, she suggests purchasing a passport card, which will meet the Real ID requirement.
And here's what it will cost you. A passport costs $175 with a passport card. A Real ID driver's license in Montana will cost you about $60. But in Gallatin and some other counties, there's a long waiting list to get that driver's license appointment. Right now, that wait in Bozeman is 69 days, and it takes at least 10 days to process your license. So state officials say you'll want to make sure you get that appointment no later than June 1st of 2020. And if Montana is anything like its residents, we kind of wait to the last minute to do some things. So good idea to get that done now.
You won't be allowed into the TSA checking without it. So there you go. 6:36 now. Another news this morning. Montana has received a $10 million 5-year federal grant to improve health outcome for pregnant and postpartum women in rural areas.
The new program is called the Montana Obstetric Maternal Support, or MOMS program. The program will utilize Billings Clinic Project ECHO to connect OBGYN experts to rural providers, simulation education via mobile sim lab trucks, and telemedicine.
According to the CDC, Montana has the 6th highest maternal mortality ratio in the nation, with rural and Native American communities at the highest risk. DPHHS Director Sheila Hogan said the MOMS program will help the state build on current efforts to significantly improve delivering health care in Montana.
The beauty of it is there's an infrastructure in place in many communities. So we're utilizing existing systems when we can. And our goal is that people have a successful pregnancy and successful outcome, whether you're in Billings or whether you're in Bighorn County.
Here's a staggering statistic for you. Currently, more than half of Montana counties, do not have an OB or nurse practitioners providing maternal health care. The MOMS program expected to launch in early 2020.
Wow, what a vital program that would be.
That's great.
For all those rural areas, all that telehealth stuff is just incredible.
Absolutely.
Yes. And the Butte Fire Department received the first piece to a memorial honoring firefighters killed in an explosion more than 120 years ago.
MTN's John Amy tells us about the Kenyon Connell disaster that nearly wiped out Butte's entire fire department more than a century ago.
The explosion at a warehouse in Butte 124 years ago was literally heard across the state. The Kenyon Connell warehouse disaster took the lives of 57 citizens and 13 firefighters, wiping out almost all of the department. This week, the first statue of a memorial commemorating the tragedy was delivered to the Butte Fire Department.
It's fitting, it's the right thing to do to recognize these people.
Belgrade artist Jim Dolan delivered the first piece of the statue, which represents one of the department's horses that survived the blast. The metal sculpture shows the devastation of the explosion.
I want to make him look like he's still in shock because the fire chief got blown apart in front of him. And I try to make it look like he has some ash on him and like he's just still like he's in shock from what just happened.
The 1895 blast occurred at a warehouse illegally stocked with tons of explosives. Students from the Butte History Club have been pushing for this memorial for years after learning about the tragedy.
Firefighters are people, like great people too, and they're heroes of Butte. And we should learn to love our heroes.
The Kenyon Connell warehouse explosion was a disaster of unimaginable proportions. The blast was heard in Willow Creek, and the flash was seen as far as Belgrade.
It's been 125 years and they finally marked this this event. 59 people got killed, and so I think that's what we want to do, realize this is part of Butte's history.
In Butte, John Amy, MTN News.
That is beautiful. By the way, the memorial being funded totally through donations from the community. The group needs to raise about $45,000 to complete the rest of that monument.
I love the way Jim Dolan talks about that horse. Like, I wanted to still have that horse being shocked. You could see the dust on it. I mean,
his work has life.
The fact that you could see the flash all the way to Belgrade.
You could hear it in Willow Creek.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Unbelievable. Yeah. What a story.
Yep.
It is time for a quick break here on your Friday morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming up, a very frightening situation for passengers in Billings after a man hijacked a Met Transit bus yesterday.
First, we're going to check in with Anthony Mason to see what's coming up at 7 o'clock on CBS This Morning.
Good morning. Ahead on CBS This Morning, the White House says President Trump welcomes an impeachment trial in the Senate. We'll look at what's next and talk to his former chief of staff, Reince Priebus, about who he thinks influences the president most on foreign policy. Plus, the rising cost of cars. We investigate why new vehicle prices have spiked and how Americans are racking up debt to afford them. We'll see you at 7.